was this? Ochako shifted just barely in place. She was laying on something soft. A bed. It was comfy and warm. Wait, what happened? Ochako slowly tried opening her eyes, only to be blinded by the window light next to her. Ochako rose an arm to shield her eyes as she looked around. Ochako shook her head, not believing her eyes at those that sat in chairs next to her bed. Mom, Dad. Ochako asked quietly. Mr. Uraraka, who was reading a book, looked up hurriedly with a large smile as Mrs. Uraraka put down her crochet in order to stand next to her daughter's bedside. Ochako dear, it's so good to see you awake, Ochako's mother said, tears forming in the corner of her closed eyes. Mr. Uraraka nodded, setting his book down on the nightstand between the bed and the chair. Welcome back to us, Ochako. We missed you, Ochako's dad said gently, standing next to his wife. But, you guys were arrested. They took you away because of the hospital incident. Ochako said, sitting up with tears flowing down her cheeks. They did, Mr. Uraraka said, sitting on the young girl's edge of the bed. However, thanks to you and your little team of trainee heroes, you caught two of the people who were truly responsible. Asagiri and her partner in crime Yosuke. Ua were able to put in a good enough argument in order to get us out of custody. Granted, we are on probation, Mrs. Uraraka said, putting a hand to her cheek. However, Ua convinced the government to allow us to stay under probation here at the school building, under the same safety and protection other trainee heroes' parents have while staying. So that means, Ochako said, sniffling away trying to keep herself together. Her parents smiled down at their daughter. Yes, we're back and here to stay, Ochako, Mrs. Uraraka said, bringing her daughter tightly into her arms. Ochako couldn't keep the tears back as she bawled into her mother's button-up shirt. Mr. Uraraka felt tears forming in his own eyes as he wrapped his wife and daughter into his own arms. The family sat for what seemed to be an eternity, feeling the love of a family brought together yet again. As much as we would like to stay, now that you're awake we have to inform the teachers and recovery girl, Mr. Uraraka said, standing as he wiped his eyes. We also have to get your room organized. They gave us your dorm room when we moved in, so I guess we have to squeeze you in. It's a small space for a family of 3, but it's not like we aren't used to small spaces, right? Ochako smiled, wiping tears away from her eyes. Yeah, Mr. Uraraka and Mrs. Uraraka gave Ochako a kiss on the forehead each, Mrs. Uraraka pressing her forehead to Ochako's for a second before they began to exit the room. Mrs. Uraraka fully walked out. However, Mr. Uraraka lingered for just a moment, turning back towards the girl in the bed. You should give that boyfriend of yours a text. He's been checking in every day for you. You've been out for a while now. With that, he fully left the room. Ochako blinked, processing what her father had just told her. She had been out for a few days. Her boyfriend was checking in on her daily. Izuku. Suddenly, flashes of the battle Izuku and herself had fought appeared in her mind. Wait a moment. Ochako looked down at her body, which was now sporting a white gown instead of her now familiar hero costume and brown coat. She felt it, the power of a stockpiling quirk coursing through her. It wasn't a dream. She had the power of one for all. Ochako looked over at the flip phone sitting on the nightstand next to her. Slowly she reached over, grabbing the phone and opening the messages up to the familiar loving contact. She smiled as she typed a quick note, before sending it. She placed the phone gently in her lap as she got comfortable in her sitting position in bed, staring out into the morning sunrise. So, this is where you and All Might trained, huh? Bakugo asked roughly as he felt his feet sink into the sand of the beach. Izuku smiled as he looked out into the waves, the morning sun now appearing above them. Yay, it was a pretty intense last year of middle school. I thought I would die a couple of times if I'm being honest. Refrigerators and truck tires were things I never thought I would be able to confidently say I've moved alone. Izuku chuckled as he stood next to Bakugo. Bakugo grunted as he sat in the sand, looking out at the same waves Izuku was. Ochako and I also trained here once. Months ago, she punched me in the face without telling me we were training. Hurt quite a bit. Izuku said, thinking back. I've had a lot of good memories here. You know what you're gonna do about her yet? Bakugo asked. Izuku nodded just slightly. Yay, I have a plan. Izuku said. When my true consciousness was wandering one for all for those weeks, I learned from the previous users what all my quirks were. However, I also learned something important. One for all can only be properly used by the quirkless. A body should only be able to hold one proper quirk. One for all takes in what makes it stronger, copying quirks and embedding it into its own stockpiling. However, if someone with a quirk inherits it, sure their quirk will be copied however. It doesn't replace or absorb the original quirk, Bakugo finished. Meaning the body is overflowing. A person would technically have two fucking quirks. You die if your body remains overquirked. Yay, Izuku said simply. A gentle wind blew as the two stood, their hair waving gently in the gust. Hey, Ka-chan, Izuku said without looking at the angry blonde. Bakugo grunted in acknowledgement. When I was stuck in one for all, I could still feel my physical body. I knew what it was doing, what it felt, what it thought. It brought back a lot of painful feelings from when you bullied me back then. Bakugo didn't respond as he continued to look out towards the ocean. Izuku continued. I said some things, back at the log cabin. Things that I kept under wraps. You hurt me a lot back then and I think because I never told you that, I just pushed them down and chose to try and ignore and move on, but I think the only way to move on is to acknowledge you hurt me back then. But I want to be your friend Ka-chan. We used to be close back before our quirks. I miss that. I want to grow strong, together. Izuku held out his hand towards the still-sitting Bago. Bakugo glanced over at Izuku's hand before he snarled. Whatever nerd, he said roughly. However, he did reach up, taking Izuku's hand in his own. Izuku smiled as he helped Bakugo to his feet. Suddenly, Izuku felt a vibration in his pocket. Izuku took out the source of the vibration as he read the text message that had popped up. Hey dummy, I'm awake and I don't see you next to me. I better see by my bedside soon or I'm gonna be mad. I love you, Ocha. Izuku chuckled as he put the phone back in his pocket. Quote. Looks like that's my K. I gotta go, Izuku said. Bakugo grunted as Izuku turned away. See y'all later, Ka-chan. Bakugo grunted. Izuku, one for all coursing around him yet again, jumped off as he headed towards the school. Bakugo just barely looked back before looking out towards the sunrise yet again. Yoshiko stood in front of the doorway to Recovery Girl's office. He took a deep breath in. Sure, he had seen and fought with Ochako a week ago, but that was very heat of the moment. He hadn't truly interacted with Ochako in almost a month. Plus he had to be the bearer of bad news. Sure, he had a solution, but that didn't make giving the news any more enjoyable. Izuku smacked his cheeks. Izuku put all those thoughts aside for now. He just needed to see her. Izuku opened the door and walked down the aisles. There, at the final bed sat Ochako, her beautiful brown hair falling past her shoulders, her white gown covering her body, as her deep brown eyes stared through the window into the morning light. Ochako's brown orb suddenly turned to Izuku, who was standing a few feet away from her. The two stared into each other's eyes before Ochako smiled gently. Good morning, Izu, she said sweetly, tears forming in her eyes. Izuku already had waterfalls running down his cheeks. Ochako slid out of bed, her bare feet touching the cold surface of the floor. She slowly walked over towards Izuku before she wrapped her arms around him. Izuku wrapped his arms around her as well as he continued to sob. I'm sorry, he said repeatedly as he cried. Ochako started sniffling, trying to hold her sobs in. Come on Izu. Don't do this to me. I just got done crying earlier. Ochako said quietly as thicker and thicker tears fell down her cheeks, her vision growing blurry from the water in her eyes. Pale pink and green energy started to faintly circle the two as they held each other, the orange morning light shining onto the two as they cried together. Izu Ocha had finally been reunited. What shall happen in the next chapter? Stay tuned.